Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Kimor. First of all, big thank you for the reception of the last video. A lot of people seem to enjoy it, had some questions, and yeah, I want to get into some of those. So what we'll do today is discussing some tech options for the Runick White Forrest and Runick White Forrest Bystial deck. Some of these apply to both, but some only apply to the Bystial variant, and we'll get into that in a second. So the first thing I wanted to discuss were options for time. As most of you are probably aware, if time gets called, the duelist who at the end of the current phase has the most life points wins the current duel, and often cases also the match. So what we need is obviously ways we can manipulate our life points or the opponent's life points. So we saw this being very important in last format because a lot of decks take very long to perform their combos. Be it Snake Eye, U-Bell, you name it. And thus we often saw duels taking very long and game 3 being a very short game and often being just won by the Lacrima burn that any Fiendsmith deck could perform. Obviously Lacrima is banned, that's very good for us. That's a non-issue now, but simply because we're playing a Runick deck, we still have to be very aware of time. We skip our battle phases. We usually can't finish out games very quickly, so we need to discuss some options. The first one is a in-engine option, and that is Munin the Runick Wings. It's basically the worst cousin of Hugin. You summon it out the same way. Any Runick quick spell, summon it in the extra monster zone. There you have it. It has a very similar search effect, where you discard a card and it searches you any of your Runick permanent spells, which we only have one, but in Runicks you usually don't play it, it's not the best card. Just gets you additional banish off the top of the deck, but that's really not worth it unless you're playing some sort of stun variant. And your win condition is deck out. So, but it has also a targeting protection effect, which I don't think is the greatest either, because you have to activate it, unlike Hugin, which you don't have to activate actually. So that's nice, it's not an activated effect for Hugin. But what Munin does, and that's the reason why it's played in a lot of side decks. Some people also play it in the extra deck as a combo piece for level 7 Synchro monster that I'll throw up on the screen in a second. But what it does in the end phase, if it's on the field, you gain 1,000 life points, which often in time is enough to just win you the duel. But here's my issue with Munin. So obviously it's in the end phase. Let's say you go second, your opponent plays, you go into your draw phase, standby phase, main phase. Maybe try to play. If your opponent has, for example, a monster negate, you need to bait it out before you can activate Munin. And here's the issue. Your opponent can take you hostage in the main phase. They can activate a bunch of effects. Most decks can do that. And if you're unlucky, you simply don't get to your end phase. And Munin can't activate the effect. Your opponent maybe burned you or gained some life points, because a lot of decks can still do that in other ways, and you lose. That's it. Munin can't do that. So that's the reason why I personally don't like it that much. Also, it's not very interactive, so just for me, it's not very fun gameplay. So we have another option, and that is Scarlight Red Dragon Archery. This one doesn't gain you life points, but it burns the opponent. And the way you summon it, it's very generic. Just any tuner, any non-tuner, it's a level 8. So it's very easy to summon out with one of the White Forest tuners, Sylvie or Rushia, plus a Jerry. That's the way you get it out. These two plus a Jerry are already your Scarlight. So what you would usually do is just play your turn a little bit, get one of these two out, summon a Jerry with the Runick spell, synchro into the Scarlight, and this one even works on turn 1 if you go first. Reason being is you can activate its effect and it destroys any special summoned monster on the field with less or equal attack, so anything under or at 3k, and your opponent gets burned for 500 for any destroyed monster. You can summon out after this with the Runick spell. Now the Hugin, don't summon a Jerry because it can't be destroyed by card effects. Maybe you have a little Z on field, things like this. And that way You burn your opponent for 500, 1000, 1500, and so on damage, which is very huge. Easily win in time. I also like this because it's multi-purpose, simply because it's also obviously a board wipe. Sometimes that comes in handy. And yeah, I like it very much as an option simply for that. And you can do it in your main phase. You can do it on turn 1, which is also very good. You can obviously do the same with Munin, but I prefer Scarlight simply because it's multi-purpose. It's also basically a Dark Hole or Raigeki. The third option we have, and that's one I would advise anybody to play, regardless of that, is Spooky Dogwood, Ghost Assassin Spooky Dogwood. Your opponent calls an effect that summons a monster, you just chain it, you get life points, you win the duel. It's usually like that. Normally I wouldn't say this isn't a very good hand trap. It doesn't impact the opponent really. I'm sure you gain life points, but it doesn't interrupt their play, and then that's a really bad thing for card advantage, and then they just take 2 turns to kill you instead of 1. But with time rules, this is obviously very strong if duels take very long. We have a third option that I don't have, so I can't show it on screen, but I'll throw it up here, and that's Emergency Provisions. It's a quick play spell, which is very important. You can already do it in your draw phase. You can do it at any time in your opponent's phase if you have it set, which I don't know why you would do that, but let's say this is my Emergency Provisions. What you could typically do, let's say you activate a Runick spell to summon out a Hugin, right? Your opponent maybe already has a card on their field, so you go Smiting Storm, you go Flashing Fire, you go Slumber, and then you activate your Emergency Provisions, send these 3 to the graveyard, and you gain 3k life points. Win the duel. That also works in time. That's a very nice option. Thing is, and that's the same issue you have with Spooky Dogwood, you have to draw it. And any card you always have to draw is a little bit janky if you can't access it in engine. Munin you can access in engine. The Scarlight is very easy to summon because you have 4, 5, 6 tuners you usually play. Z gets you to those tuners as well, and Jerry you summon out with any Runick Quick spell. People usually play at least 17, 16, 17, sometimes more. So normally on any hand you have multiples of those, so it's very easy to get out. That's why I personally prefer playing the Scarlight and playing the Dogwood on the side, both of them. And yeah, that's what I would do for time. So the next thing I want to discuss are floodgates. Of course, pretty much everybody hates them, but often they're necessarily evil in order to win duels. And a lot of top meta decks can play them currently. For example, Snake Eyes, you can play your turn, set a floodgate, and on your own turn, you activate Diabell Star from your hand, send the floodgate for cost, and you can play them. White Forest, you have a similar thing. LZ can send for cost, Rushia can send for cost, Astella, I don't ever hear sends for cost, Asiela can send for cost, Diabell as well, but this doesn't really come up because it's an interruption effect. You could still do it, but usually it's not really smart to send your floodgate on the opponent's turn. And yeah, that's why White Forest decks, and especially Runick White Forest, can play very well with floodgates. The obvious choice often was Skildrin, especially since it was at 3. Most decks can play very well on the RIP. On your turn, you just deactivate it with your White Forest monsters. You can, for example, special back your Rushia from the graveyard by shuffling back one of your synchro monsters from field or graveyard. Activate her effect, send for cost, even though she's negated, that still works. Obviously, Skildrin is 2-1, so that hits most decks that can play Skildrin, but we don't really care about that. I'll show you why in a second. Other good and strong floodgate options are, for example, Tikaboo. You can only control 1 monster of each type. This is very strong against the best deck in the format right now, and everybody thinks that's Yubel. Yubel obviously only playing Fiends for the most part. You flip this, they're stuck on their first Fiend, they can't summon other out another Fiend monster, and you win. That's really it. If they can't out it, you win. Then we have Rivalry of the Warlords, which says you can only control one type of monster, and this is really strong against a lot of decks as well. Of course, Yubel opposite doesn't care about it very much, but most decks usually play a bunch of different types. You lock them into one, at best the one that can play well under, and you cook them. And you can play with your spellcasters in the Runick White Forrest. You can play with just your dragons in the Bystial variant as well. You can just play Bystial beatdown and win this way. Wavesolve goes in match, but I don't think most decks really care about this right now, so I wouldn't include it. But currently, I run all these three in the side deck because I think they have a lot of application against a lot of strong decks. And the way you access them, even though they're at 1, is this card. Foolish Burial Goods. What it does is you send one spell trap card from your deck to the graveyard, and of course it's once per turn. But this means you can access any floodgate, even the barrier, which I don't have in here right now, but you can do the same with it. It's very good against Branded, Tempai, Voiceless, especially now since they're cut off from the Branded engine. You can do this against Chimera, they're cooked with it as well. It's very good. So what you would do is very simply, you activate the Foolish Burial Goods, send a floodgate to your graveyard, and then play. You do the usual stuff. LZ sends a spell trap for costs, so just one of your extenders, let's say the Sylvie, and you go with them into a level 6. Let's say we do the Coral Dragon. Ta-da! We activate a Runick, get a Hugin out, search our Fountain, and then we go into another Synchro with these two into the Diabell. Activate Diabell effect, target the floodgate, add it back to our hand, set it, and flip it on the opponent's turn. That's really how you access it. It's super easy. If you play 2 to 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods, it's super consistent as well, and you can flip any floodgate on the opponent's turn. Right now, I think Skill Drain, Tikaboo, and Rivalry are the best ones to play. You can play under any of them pretty well. You can kill your opponent under both Tikaboo and Rivalry, especially in the Runick combo variant with the Bystials. You can play very well under Tikaboo. Skill Drain kills most decks they can play, because most decks depend on their monster effects. Yeah, that's how you place floodgates. I play these in the side. You could do this in the main as well, especially in the pure variant. Just play Skill Drain in the main, side these, and just access them with the Foolish Burial Goods. Very easy. The next thing I want to discuss were some cards that are typically included in some Runick decks and some White Forest Runick decks even. Why you could play them, why you maybe shouldn't play them. The first one is Sleipnir, the Runick main. It's basically like a budget SP. Just like the other Runick monsters, you just summon it out with a Runick quick spell. You have it on the field. And in your main phase or your opponent's battle phase, you can target one of your opponent's monster, banish this and that monster until the end phase. That's the main part of the effect. You can also summon out tokens, but I don't think that's very important. It can be nice in the battle phase to just live. Let's say you have 2 Runick quick spells, you summon out the Jerry gets killed, you can destroy a monster, the next one summons out Sleipnir, you activate the effect, banish one monster, and usually you should live. But compared to SP, this is just way weaker, less interactive, and I think, especially with how tight the extra deck is right now, since we included the White Forest monsters, I don't think there's really space for it. You could argue to cut some cards, but the extra deck right now is just so tight that there isn't really much space to play something else. Like, all these are pretty much non-negotiable. You could say Legacia, Baguska, these are typical cards you could cut. Could even cut the Triage Master, though I like it as an option to go into a Chaos Angel, get an additional draw. On turn 1 I usually summon a Cold Dragon, but turn 3 I often summon the Triage Master. It's a very nice card. You could even potentially cut a Jerry if you play the Bystial variant. But for example, if I would cut these, I would put in an SP. Or even a Typhoon. I think these are better options than Sleipnir, so that's why I wouldn't include it. Another card I want to discuss is the Iris Sword Soul. I played this in my variant without the Bystials. It's a nice endboard piece basically, because it's very easy to summon out. And the typical hand trap tier list, you always see it at like F tier or whatever. Usually it's considered to be a very bad card, because you summon it out by having a negated monster on the field, which isn't always that easy to have. Then you can quick effect summon her, and every single time your monster summons your opponent summons a monster, you get a bonus effect. The most important one for this deck would be to draw 2 cards if your monster summons a monster from the deck. Reason being, of course, we play Runicks, and with Runicks you want to draw into more Runicks. They're your most important interruption on the opponent's turn, and drawing 2 cards is just crazy powerful in any Runick deck. You can just draw into stronger interruptions. In other decks you could potentially draw into hand traps, but I don't think it's really worth it. And for most decks it really sucks to summon this card out. But in this deck it's very easy. You can do it even on your opponent's turn to play a little bit around Nib. What you do is, for example, you have a Diabell, or maybe you played the Arciala line, you have her in graveyard, and you have a Rushia in graveyard. Or Sylvie works the same way. You activate the Rushia, shuffle back the Arciala or the Diabell, doesn't matter, have her on the field. And now she's negated, considered a negated monster, so you can just summon out the Iris Sword Soul. And as soon as your opponent summons a monster from the deck, which a lot of decks do, draw 2 cards, draw into another interruption, so that's very nice. The reason why I wouldn't play her, at least in the Bystial variant, is because the deck is just very tight and it's just a win more card. You have other draw options, for example, with the Branded Regain, you can draw into cards on your opponent's turn, you control when. This one also works very, very nice with SP, so be aware of that. In the other variant, I like to play it, but maybe just as a side deck option if you feel like you need to draw additional cards and your opponent really consistently summons from the deck. But otherwise, it allows you to play into level 12 synchros, which is nice as well with the Rushia and the Sylvie. You can, for example, go into Legacia, but at the end of the day, I don't think this is really very much worth it. But it's very easy to set up in this deck. Again, in the pure variant, just Runick White Forrest, I would at least play it in the side deck. It's a fun option to play around with. And the last card in this group of cards I want to discuss is the Tales of the White Forest. I showed you in my last deck profile that I'm not playing it. I'm currently debating to rotate it back in. The reason being is, of course, it's a nice extender, but you would have to play the Arciala line. You don't go into Coral Dragon, at least unless you hard draw either this or the trap, and you can get 2 tuners out. The reason why I don't think it's necessary in the Bystial variant is because you can extend with, let's say you play your typical line, you have like a Rushia, you get out a Bystial, let's say, for example, it's the Jerusalem, and we go with them into a Dispetter. Rushia is in the graveyard, we take another Bystial, we'll just use the Jerusalem here as well, so I don't have to grab another card. Banish her, summon the next Bystial, then we can use Dispetter, summon her back, go with them into level 10, like the Chaos Angel or the Chenyang, and that's a really easy way to extend as well. So you don't typically really need that. Of course, you can even shuffle back your Diabell to get this one back out. So I don't think it's very much necessary to play the Stories of the White Forest, but in the pure variant, I would still play it. But I think in the Bystial variant, you have enough ways to extend without this card. The next card I want to discuss is a very nice boss monster that a lot of people feared a while back, but it doesn't really see play much right now, if at all in branded, but most people cut it, and that is Dragoon. It's a nice tower, can't be destroyed by card effects, can't be targeted. It has an Omni negate by discarding a card, and it destroys the negated card, which is nice as well. If it negates, it also gets bigger by 1k, this is nice. And it also has an effect to pop an opponent's monster, burn them for the 80k, which is very good. And there is a pretty easy way to access it if you play the Bystial variant of this deck. You can't do this in the regular Runick White Forrest, at least not that I'm aware of, without playing something super janky in the extra deck. But the way you access Dragoon is with Muddy Mud Dragon. Muddy Mud Dragon, level 6 synchro, so super easy to access. Any of your level 4 tuners plus LZ or a Hugin, you synchro into Muddy Mud Dragon, have it on the field. What it does is it's a fusion substitute for any material that's listed on a fusion monster. Dragoon, we obviously have Dark Magician plus Red Eyes or a Dragon Effect monster. So this will count as Dark Magician. In your main phase, you can also use this as a poly for monsters on the field. So what we need is a Bystial on the field. Typical in our combo lines, we have Lubellion on the field. Like usually we would discard it, search a Bystial, summon out Dissipator, tribute Dissipator for this, put the Brand Regain on field, and then we can access Mud Dragon and have Lubellion on the field, fuse into Dragoon. And now you already see the issue with this card is, I showed you the extra deck is very tight. We need 2 cards for this in the extra deck. There's another way you could access Dragoon, but we need 4 cards in the main deck, plus this and another card in the extra deck as well, which I don't think is very much worth it, and that would be with Duality and going with Cartesia into Grand Gignal, activating Duality. Duality sends out Dragoon. And I love this card. I think it's a really nice end board piece. A lot of decks actually do struggle to out it, but, and here's the big issue, the extra deck is very tight. If you want to plug this in, right now I could cut Legacia and Baguska, so I might try that for my next locals. But as soon as I get SP and Typhoon from the tin boxes, which release on next Thursday, on the 19th, I don't think I have the space for this. That's just the reality of it. But it's a very fun option to play around with, especially Dragoon is very much budget now because of the Rarity Collection too. Muddy Mud Dragon I don't think is an expensive card as well, so if you love to play Dragoon and you like your Bystials, then this is a very nice option to play with. The last tech option I wanted to discuss is Duality. With Duality, you can tribute one of your light or dark monsters on the field and special summon out a monster of the opposite attribute. So you tribute a light monster, you summon out a dark, and vice versa, of the same level and same type. So you have a level 2 fairy that's light, you summon out a level 2 fairy that's dark. And there's many applications for this in the Runick deck in general, for Hugin, for Jerry. There's good targets, but especially if you play Runick Synchro variant, this is very nice, especially with Bystials. I'll show you which cards you have in a second. It also has additional graveyard effect where you can banish it for cost and target a light and dark monster in your graveyard. And if it resolves, you shuffle the light and dark monsters back into your deck or extra deck, depending on which you choose, and then you draw 1 card. Each effect is once per turn, but this is a very nice card. And the Runick Bystials with Quem Cartesia or Quem Ecclesia, you always play this. Always play this. This is very good. Reason being is you can target dodge your Hugin. So you have your Hugin on the field, you summon it out with the Runick spell, activate the effect, and your opponent wants to hit it with Valor or Imperm, you activate Duality, summon out Alvain. Alvain also is a nice combo piece, because this and Lubellion is instantly a level 10 synchro because it's a tuner. It's a vanilla, but it's a tuner, so that's why it's very nice. And we have other strong options. For example, we can do the same with Jerry. Jerry turns into Fabled Unicorn. This is a crazy Omni-Negate. You just need to have the same amount of cards in your hand as your opponent, and you negate any card they activate. And the crazy thing is, this isn't an activated effect. So you can negate Super Poly, Dark Ruler, all those cards that are really tough to deal with, Forbidden Droplet, whatever. As long as you have the same amount of cards in your hand, this turns off everything. It's a crazy card. The next thing you can do, which is very nice, is turn your Bystials into Malong. Malong TCG exclusive. It's really funny to do on your opponent's turn. Summon out Drew Swarm, have your duality set. Activate duality, tribute your Drew Swarm, summon out Malong. You can send one monster they have on to the graveyard. Malong has a similar effect if it leaves the field. You can target one card on their field, and I think this will be open, and put it back to their hand, which means any extra deck monster just goes yoinked. You can obviously do this on your turn as well. Get rid of 2 cards this way, because this is a tune as well. So this plus a Jerry is a level 10, this plus a Hugin is a level 8, so that's very nice. And the last one you can do is turn Rebellion into the Scarlight. That's why I would play this in the main if you play Duality, to have a really good Duality target, because then you just have a Raigeki Darkhold at any point in the duel. And very nice, but again, you here see the issue. Of course, you don't have to play every option, especially Alvin is important because you want Hugin to resolve, but the extra deck is very tight. These two would be the least amount I would play. I would probably also play the Fable Unicorn, but what do we cut? That's the big issue, and that's why I'm currently not running this. As I said before, it's also nice to summon Dragoon with this, because Cartesia plus any Light Dark turns into Grand Gignol. Duality turns Grand Gignol into Dragoon. But just like with Mighty Mudragon, Dragoon doesn't have the pop effect because it wasn't summoned with a normal monster. So yeah, these are my tech options. Let me know if you know about anything else that's worth running in Runick White Forest or Runick White Forest Bystials. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.